Welcome, Ryan Bloomfield. How you doing?
What's up, Nick? That was impressive stuff. I don't know if I can bring it like that crew. Well, no, I'm not going to sing either, but
okay, that's probably good. Actually, I haven't heard your voice, so maybe not. But no, we needed a good type presentation here from Ryan Bloomfield. And of course, if you don't know Ryan Bloomfield, he is a writer and social media director for Baseball HQ, as well as an associate editor of the Baseball Forecaster. He also happens to be an FSWA award winner and 5-time finalist. While he may not be the best poker player, he is certainly a world-class baseball analyst. You can find him on Twitter at RyanBHQ. Thanks so much for being a part of PitchCon.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me. Thanks for putting this on. And yeah, I did last like an hour and a half in poker Friday night, so I'll take it. Normally, I'm out after about 45 minutes. So.
That was a blast. And by the way, go ahead and share your screen whenever you want. I can push it up into StreamYard. But yeah, I've had the pleasure of meeting Ryan at First Pitch Arizona. And it's just a blast. It's really cool seeing you here. I'm excited for this. You've seen balloon boards all over Twitter. We're going to see the best of them today. So I'm going to let you have the floor right now. Take it away.
Thanks, Nick. All right. Yeah, you have seen these all over Twitter if you followed me over the last couple of years, I guess, what I've branded as bloom boards. And what I want to do today is not only just kind of go through, and the title's, I don't know, somewhat of a misnomer. We will go through some of the best of bloom board. It's going to be a little bit of trivia style. So I want as much interaction from you all on Twitch, on Twitter, as possible as we kind of go through these. But in addition to kind of a best of, I want to give you just kind of an intro to what they are. If you don't follow me on Twitter, and speaking of, I'm at RyanBHQ. And I also want to give you just a little bit of how I actually make these things, a little bit of how the sausage is made. Won't get too deep into the technical stuff, but for those of you that do want to kind of further your baseball analysis, I'm going to kind of show you how I do this stuff, how I combine all these data sources. So with that, we will begin. And again, a bloom board is these things in the background. So you've probably seen these tables with the formatting and things like that. Essentially what they are is, they're lists of players at its basic form. I'm not the best marketing person in the world. So yeah, list of players, but they are interesting players. These are guys that answer questions that I think are relevant fantasy wise, that tick certain boxes for metrics and skills that I think I'm interested in. And that I also think are predictive and important for the upcoming season or in season. These interesting lists of players can answer questions, things that we're thinking about when we're prepping for drafts. So things like, for example, which hitters, hit the most barrels and strike out the least and go outside of the top 300 in drafts. So I could throw together that information and put out a board and dive deeper into those guys. Things like pitch mixes. Those are a big part of bloom boards, using StatCast and pitch mix to look at pitch mix changes, changes to actual pitches themselves, how many pitchers have 3 or more elite out pitches in their arsenal. That will be a bloom board trivia question later on in the presentation. Which starting pitchers miss the most bats and keep the ball on the ground, which hitters barrel it up the most but aren't hitting home runs, which are making great contact but aren't showing through on the results. And I could go on for a while for these. I try to put out, at least in draft season, one every day from like January to March. Sometimes it gets a little bit thin, but I've got a pretty good core group of questions that I try and answer and share with you all on Twitter. So one of the things I think with bloom boards and with these boards that is unique is it's a collab from different websites. So I personally prefer a lot of different metrics from different websites. So I and your mileage may vary. I love kind of the barrels and hard hit metrics that are on StatCast. Eric Carty gave a fantastic presentation yesterday on BatCast and the BatX, which I was happy to see because he looked at barrels, descriptive and predictive. I think that's a really important thing for gauging hitter power, but also things like Fangraphs has just excellent pitching metrics, excellent plate discipline metrics that I want to combine with that StatCast data. You've also got information from Baseball HQ, which I try not to share publicly as much. That's more for the HQ subscribers, but I use that to build my articles at HQ and share with those folks. And then also like NFBC data. So I try and combine all that information and make it something that you all can digest and think about with actionable takeaways for fantasy. Another big thing with these boards is it's kind of like I call it a cross-check of the player pool. I think the most common way that a lot of people go about analyzing the player pool is kind of player by player. You'll go through and look at a position and go look at player A, analyze their plate discipline, their power, whatever, make some kind of conclusion on their outlook for the following season, and then go to the next player, rinse and repeat throughout. We are human beings. Like I try and do that. And I just, sometimes I'm tired. Sometimes I don't give every player the actual due justice that they deserve and the actual, 5-10 minute deep dive that everyone should get. I was talking about this with Mike Curlin on a podcast yesterday. And even like the kind of the old boring veteran guys, I tend to kind of gloss over those folks when I'm going player by player because I think I know what their outlook is. So these boards just kind of look at the player pool in a different manner and try and kind of fill in those cracks on some players that you might not have picked up when you're going player by player through the pool. And that really start the deeper dive. And that's probably the main point that I want to take away from these boards before we get into some of the examples is if just because I throw together a list of hitters who have an excellent strikeout rate and a great barrel rate, that doesn't mean I'm totally in on every single one of them. These filters and things are largely arbitrary. That's a big drawback to some of these things. So I try and put this in when I put these out there on Twitter, give it some context. And I always say it should be the start, not the end of a deeper dive. So if somebody comes up on a particular board, it's really just to highlight that player for you. And then you can then go in and give that player, maybe you glossed over him when you did your first pass and go in a little bit deeper. So that's what we'll do today as well. Just a couple examples of that process. So a lot going on this slide, but this is just a general concept of what I was talking about before, combining all that information and some of the metrics that I really like to use from each of these major sites. Just because there's so much out there that it can be, especially if you don't do this all the time, extremely overwhelming. So I use barrels, exit velocity from StatCast. I use pitch mix data from StatCast, from Fangraphs, talked about this earlier, but plate discipline, batted ball metrics, your basic pitching metrics. I use the NFBC data to get a gauge of the marketplace. And I use Baseball HQ's metrics as well. I kind of jumble that all into a database. That thing in the middle is not an Oreo filling without the cookies. That is hilarious, King Hippo. That's a symbol for a database. I'll go into a little bit more detail for those of you that want to dive in to that process. But I take all this data from different places, jumble it in, and come out with a Bloom board that combines, for example, on the right side here, you got a list of hitters with their ADP, their strikeout rate, and their barrels. Okay. So that's the general gist of what I try and kind of combine and put in for you. All right. With that out of the way, and we'll get back to some of the details about halfway through the presentation. Want to do this for a good cause. So we want to guess that player. I'm going to throw up, I think, 7 or 8 different Bloom boards throughout this presentation. I want you all to guess who they are. I will give clues if nobody's responding or we're stuck to make it extremely obvious who it might be. But for every right answer that you guys get, we need to reach this $10,000 goal for PitchCon. So I'll toss in $5 for every single answer that you guys get correct here throughout this hour. All right. So this is a list of this is kind of the basic board that I might do is look at guys who strike out the least. So I'm taking a strikeout rate from Fangraphs. An excellent strikeout rate, so under 20%. I believe the league average is 22%. And you can see the 2 guys who I've got in question marks here on the board. If you want to just type in who you think they might be, I've also got the barrel rate, so an above average or excellent barrel rate from StatCast, combining those 2 together to see who's striking out the least and who's making the best quality of contact. And then I throw that with their ADP. From the NFBC. And what you kind of see here is just really interesting. Like you get the usual suspects at the top. So like, that's what I'm hoping for. Like it gives this cohort some validation if Mike Trout, Cody Bellinger, Juan Soto, Freddie Freeman, Anthony Rendon are showing up on this board. Like I would expect those types of hitters to be meeting all of these filters. The thing where it gets interesting is when you go further down the ADP, right? So who is this guy at 112 ADP who has similar quality of contact and frequency of contact as some of these guys going in the first 2 rounds? A little hint on that guy going ADP 112. And the ADPs are a little bit out of date. You can look them up if you want to. I don't really care. If you get it right, we all win. But it's a guy in the NL Central who just switched teams. So that's a little hint for that top guy. But then you look in like a Yandy Diaz shows up on this board. Super interesting guy going at ADP of 220 with a strikeout rate of 17% and an excellent barrel rate. When I say like the start and not the end of a deep dive, you look at Yandy Diaz and you look at his ground ball rate. And, that might be the missing piece, but that could be like one tweak away from being really good for Yandy Diaz. And then you get this guy. It's not Nick Castellanos. However, it is somebody on the same team. So that's your hint for your 112. And then you get this guy, 300 ADP. And that's really interesting. We'll get to him next. We do have a right answer. This guy's Mike Moustakas. Okay, going over pick 100, excellent strikeout rate, excellent barrel rate. And you kind of, again, yes, he was on the Brewers, great park last year, but you take the context of this, moves to Cincinnati, second base, third base eligibility, I believe, but great hitting park, pretty solid lineup. Like I'm buying into a lot of what Mike Moustakas does. Plus he's got that track record consistency at 112. This last guy, 300. Rinaldi says he's going higher than that. That's probably true. Maybe because of the Bloom board, but these ADPs are a little bit old, but that's all right. 300 ADP. This is a guy, world champion player on the Nationals who hit a pretty important home run last World Series. I'll give it about 5 more seconds. And someone who I think with the NLDH, there we go. King Hippo, Joel. Howie Kendrick, someone with, I think, and sorry, Astros fans for this, but here's that video, that massive home run, massively important home run, I should say, off the foul pole. But Howie Kendrick, really someone who like has reinvented himself. You look at this strikeout rate, you look at the barrel rate, and then you take on top of that some of the actual approach changes that he made and has made over these last 2 seasons. Like even though he's old and we all thought we knew who he was, I'm buying in a lot to Howie Kendrick, and especially with the NLDH, like maybe he platoons a lot with expanded rosters and that sort of thing, but I think he's got a lot of avenues to play. So Howie Kendrick, 300 ADP might go up a little bit more with that NLDH, but super interesting guy. Look at that strikeout rate and barrel rate. I mean, there are not many hitters in baseball last year who have those 2 numbers so close together. So pretty cool stuff. All right, here's another one. Kind of a skills versus stats here, and Nick Castellanos, or Nicholas Castellanos. Actually, I need to make a tally here. We're 2 for 2, so that's $10 already to PitchCon. High barrels. So these are guys who are making a lot of hard contact. Castellanos leads the list again, 8%, which is really good for barrel rate per plate appearance, but aren't getting that homer to fly ball rate. So aren't getting those results. And Alex Chamberlain has done research on this that really correlates barrel rate with homer to fly ball, both for current year and not as much for the following season predictive wise. But barrels is about as good as you can get for raw skills and correlating that with homers. So taking that StatCast data with the results, with the actual fan graphs below league average, which is kind of crazy to say, 15%. Who did I actually put in here? Oh, okay. Your 2 guesses. We're going to start with the top guy, former top prospect who was involved with in one of the most egregious trades, I think, in recent memory. Hopefully that gets some answers going. But you get while you guys kind of guess that, you get the ADP here. You get your Mookie Betts. Maybe there's some even Betts was talked about on the last panel. I think Mookie Betts is a fantastic buy. obviously he's going to cost a crap ton of money, but he could end up, he was the number one player in fantasy 2 years ago. He could be that guy again. So you look at that validation and you look at some of these guys who, they have their warts, like Mike Zunino obviously can't hit the water if he fell out of a boat, but the power, you would expect a power uptick based on how the barrels and homer to fly ball rate. So we've got some answers here. This is going to be my final hint in terms of who it is. It's not the guy on top. It's the shirt he's wearing, and that is Dansby Swanson. Somebody who, again, you look at context, you look at that hair, amazing. But you look at the context. Dansby Swanson does have that prospect pedigree. He was on a lot of lists the number one prospect coming out of the draft a few years ago. Really put it together last year before a foot injury kind of derailed things. And you look at that ADP, though, 240 probably has gone up a little bit since then. And then you throw the speed on top of it. So Dansby Swanson is somebody that is putting it together and didn't quite show the results in a little bit more than a half season last year. Last bit, has a personal history with somebody in the chat going at 330 ADP. This is somebody who has hit over 280 or maybe over 300 each of the last 2 years, has excellent batting average skills, but is also putting together a little bit more power growth. So you're seeing a little bit more barrels, but wasn't getting the homers with it. So I've got some hints here. It's one of these two guys is your final hint. See if anyone gets it. One of them looks more athletic than the other. It's not Yancey Eaton, it's Corey Dickerson. Corey Dickerson is someone going very late in drafts, and one of the reasons why I'll count it correct because Nick, you gave that hint. Nancy, this is you. So Corey Dickerson's a guy who I really like, is going way late. If you need a fourth or fifth outfielder, that's a guy who's here. He's got some injury history and is starting to put together the power with an excellent batting average base, despite the home park. I don't recognize Yancey without a shirt on. That is hilarious. All right. Switching over to the pitcher side. So I do these bloom boards for obviously hitters and pitchers. What I, love to look on, and we could talk about pitching, and you've listened to excellent panels on PitchCon already throughout this weekend. But just at a very basic level, strikes, whiffs, ground balls, like those are key skills that a pitcher can have. So if you kind of jumble those all together, throw some ADP on it, I looked at pitchers who throw strikes. So at Baseball HQ, we use ball percentage. A better than average is 36% or lower. And then I take the Fangraphs data for swinging strike rate and ground ball rate. Swinging Ks for starters over 11%, ground ball rate over 40%. And then we sort it by ADP, again, just to kind of get that, that validation. You can see, obviously Strasburg, Morton, Kershaw, Darvish, Syndergaard, like there's a lot of skill in that group. And then you've got guys, this isn't really a Sam Gaviglio love fest, but you've got a 750 ADP guy, but you've got Alex Young, who is really interesting to me, especially in a shortened season if Arizona decides to go with like a 6 or 8 man rotation. So I want to open this up for some guesses. We've got the first pair is a pair of teammates. So you can see that question mark, a 180 ADP and a 247 ADP. Same team. Guys who one of them has absolutely burned probably everybody in this chat at some point in their fantasy baseball career. The other teammate pitching in a horrible pitcher's park was an extremely polarizing guy heading into drafts, actually each of the last 2 years. So we got a couple of guesses. There we go. Rinaldi and King Hippo, Ramon Marquez and John Gray. So this is where and this is kind of when I say the start, not the end of analysis. Again, just because I throw Ramon Marquez and John Gray on a bloom board does not mean I'm all in on them. Does not mean I think they're as good as a Yu Darvish or a Clayton Kershaw kind of thing. Like John Gray has destroyed me multiple years, and I'm still licking my wounds from that. So I am still out on John Gray, despite the, kind of the sexy upside that he still has. It's just nobody conquers Coors. Herman Marquez is a little bit more interesting. And I want to dive a little bit deeper. You can see the table here on the bottom left. This is Marquez kind of Ross. Whoops. Oh no, gave away the answer to the next one. Hopefully you guys weren't paying attention. This is Herman Marquez the last 2 seasons. So 2018, you look at the ball rate, the swinging strike rate, the ground ball rate. He actually improved on each one of these metrics last season. And you look at the surface ERA, though, went pretty much up a full run from 377 to 476. Last year at this time, Herman Marquez had an ADP of 80. This year, Herman Marquez, again, skills-wise, I would argue, very similar guy, is going at an ADP of 180. Who is the true Herman Marquez? Probably somewhere in between. Take that deeper dive and kind of figure out you've got the same guy with 2 wildly different price points from each of the last 2 seasons and think of what you want to do. So 180, I mean, Herman Marquez is quite tantalizing. So the other guy here, a little bit more expensive, but Rinaldi, you're all over it. Frankie Montas. And Frankie Montas is a little bit, I struggle with Frankie. Okay. And in the Baseball Forecaster, we do kind of a pro and con sometimes for when you've got kind of conflicting data on a person. So yes, like the raw skills from 2019 and 2019 only were really, really good for Frankie Montas. You look at those elite skills. Yes, they're there. You dive a little bit deeper. You look at Frankie's pitch mix. Like he added that splitter, and it was one of the best pitches in the game last season. So an excellent swinging strike rate. I didn't put it on the slide for some reason, but I think like 21% swinging strike rate and a 63% ground ball rate. And he throws that often. And there are not many pitches in baseball, if any, that can match that number of whiffs and ground balls. So like on that side, you're buying into like a half season of what Frankie Montas did last year. You're paying that, I would argue, kind of full freight for what he did. On the on the con side is that full freight, is that ADP. Like you're kind of paying that Frankie's going to be what he was last year, and there's not a whole lot of room for him to kind of regress back. And again, the con here, some of it was suspension related, but you're buying in on a guy in the top 120 picks that has a career high of just 96 innings pitched in the major league level. So I can see both sides of the Frankie Montas debate. I lean a little bit more to the pro side just because with pitchers, I'm more willing to kind of jump in on changes that they make to their pitch mix, add new pitches. If somebody does that, like a Giolito, for example, I'm a lot more willing to kind of forgive the track record and go in there. But again, these are the kinds of things I pull up a board of 10 pitchers. Let's do that deeper dive and make an ultimate conclusion on what you might want to do. All right, next up, a little bit of a change of pace. Pete Alonso. Everyone loves to talk about Pete Alonso and how everyone's out on Pete Alonso. I don't know how I'm going to frame this question, but I'll do it this way. So Pete Alonso obviously hit 53 home runs last year in his rookie season. That is incredible. Not only just to do it as a rookie, but also just to do it. So this board here is the last decade. Only 4 hitters have done what Pete Alonso did last year, or Pete Alonso. Jose Bautista, 2010, hit 54 homers. Chris Davis, 53 homers. And then 2017, obviously, Aaron Judge and Stanton both went 50 plus. The board here and the regression thing that I'm talking about is what they did the following season. And this is important. And one of the things that I think doesn't get talked enough about in the industry, and I fall into this trap a lot, is just looking at 2019 or just looking at last year's data. I'm willing to bet if we went back and looked at each of these 4 guys on the year that they hit over 50 home runs, like the power metrics probably fully supported it. We didn't have barrel rate back in 2010, 2013. But I'm willing to bet that those guys were there, and it was skill supported. Derek Carty, I reference Derek all the time, but he mentioned this in yesterday's presentation as well. Stats regress, but skills do too. So what I want to do is the over-under here on the average number of home runs the following season for this group that hit 50 plus the previous year. Over-under 35. See what we want to do. If anyone thinks that average is over 35 or under 35. Wow, you guys are good. Under. I'll chalk it up. $5 more to PitchCon. Here is the actual average, 32 home runs. And again, the sample size is tiny here, right? Like it's just 4 hitters. Injury was involved in some of these guys. But that's kind of the point, right? Like not only did we surpass and have an extreme outlier for power skills, but someone who was able to stay healthy as well. Both of those happening again for Pete Alonzo. There was a comment about the beer league softball player, and there we go. So yeah, like Jose Bautista, out of these 4 guys that hit the most home runs, he only had 43 the following year. Chris Davis, 26 home runs. Aaron Judge, 27. That's an injury case that I was talking about. And Stanton, 38. So, I mean, if you just look at that, do we project Pete Alonzo to hit 32? I mean, I think everyone's projecting regression. I don't think anyone's projecting Alonzo to hit over 50 again. But I'd be, even 35, 40 home runs. I mean, that's really hard to do depending on the state of the baseball in 2020. And obviously, if you just take half of that with a half season. But I thought that was interesting that it's just such an extreme outlier like that. What they do the following season. Regression is a very powerful force in our game, even if the skills support it. All right. A little bit of change of pace here. We're going to come back to trivia in just a little bit, but I want to give you all some insights into kind of how I do this and where to even start. If you wanted to, as someone analyzing the game, as a fantasy analyst, or just trying to kind of improve your data analysis skills. So I talked about kind of each of the 4 data sources that we looked at. We have had presentations on almost all of these already. So like StatCast, you can go to Baseball Savant, go to these leaderboards, and you can actually download a CSV file of these barrel rates. So that's how you can kind of start to get this stuff into a spreadsheet and do that analysis yourself. If you all have questions on how to do this, reach out to me. I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. I won't kind of demo it just for the sake of time for this. But StatCast, I use Baseball Savant to obviously get that information. For Fangraphs, Toby, Batflip Crazy, did an excellent presentation on how he uses Fangraphs as part of his process. And so I'm not going to rehash that, but I do go to Fangraphs and use their leaderboards constantly. Toby showed you how to kind of save your own leaderboards once you create a Fangraphs account. And I will recommend that please contribute to Fangraphs. They need all of our help as an industry right now. So get your Fangraphs account, chip in a little bit, and then you can actually save kind of presets of these leaderboards. So you don't have to go in and customize it every time. So you can kind of save those and then download it as a CSV file. So you see a little, it's tiny. I don't even know if you can see it in the presentation, but export data. You'll click that and it takes whatever information's on there, puts it in CSV. NFBC. So I'm a big NFBC player. I love playing the format. I love the people involved in the format. This is not an NFBC commercial, but they have the gold standard of ADP, in my opinion, in the industry. Not only just because there's skin in the game, there's money on the line for all of the NFBC drafts. But if you, I've got the URL here, and I can share the presentation with everyone afterwards. But if you just kind of Google NFBC ADP, you can slice and dice that data however you want. So if you want to look at like the last 2 weeks of NFBC ADP, you can change those date filters. You see the from and to right here. You can even do it by format. So like NFBC has points league, so you may not want to include that in your ADP to get like a true analysis. So if you just want to look at like a 12-team mixed league, 15-team league, draft champions, that sort of thing, you can change and search for that data and get the ADP however you want it. Once you get in the right place, you can just click download, and that puts it into Excel. All right. Last but not least, Baseball HQ, subtle plug to the home site here. we have a whole host of tools, and again, not to self-promote here, but we put out content all the time. And not only that, but have a whole host of tools in our own metrics that we look at, that I incorporate into my own research and share in my writings with subscribers. But you can go to baseballhq.com and download our stats that way and get them all into Excel. And so I'm talking about Excel, and I'm going to get a little bit technical here. So if you guys are, interested in that, stick around. If you want to kind of take a break, give me like 5 minutes, bathroom break, refill your beverage, come back. We'll get back to trivia. But I do want to just touch on, without going deep into the kind of the tech stuff, I do want to touch on how I do this. So if you want to learn this and do it yourself, DIY, my advice to you would be to learn SQL, structured query language. There are numerous benefits to learning how to use SQL. I actually use it all the time in my day job, and has personally kind of furthered my career in IT, but also obviously in baseball as well. So it's an excellent skill to learn if you are looking for a quarantine project and trying to get that in there. But I would highly, highly recommend that you use and learn SQL if you're interested in it. That's what I do for all of these Bloom boards. That's how I really generate all of my analysis for this. Ronaldo, Ryan, do you have your own database? Yes, I do. I'll get into that in just a second. But basically at a high level, going back to the last slide, we took our Fangraphs data. So you can kind of see just a very simple like explanation or little screenshot of that. I downloaded some data from Fangraphs with, every player, what their strikeout rate was, what their batting average was, their home runs, hard hit rate, just as an example. Okay, so I've got that in a spreadsheet. I also have my NFBC data. So I look at that same list of players, but what the market is, forcing you to pay from a fantasy perspective. So that data as well. And then I've got the MLB data, the StatCast data down here. So I've got a different kind of set, same guys, but it's a separate spreadsheet. I've got the barrels, the hard hit rate, the barrels per plate appearance, all that stuff. So how do you kind of merge these all together and do something actionable with it? For those of you who use Excel, you can use like VLOOKUP as a way to kind of join this information together. And at the title of the slide here, I call it the power of joins, but that's one of the major powerful things that you can do in SQL and learn how to take all this information, use your favorite metrics from these different sites and combine them together. Okay. What you're looking at here in the middle of the screen is what I call a Sql query. Okay. So what I do is basically you can import this information, the spreadsheet's on the left side, you can import that into your own database. And I will give you some references here next to kind of get you started and show you what I use and how I learned it. But you can basically put all this information into a database and you can write what we call a query. And that's what you're looking at in this middle piece. So without getting into the details of it, but basically I'm saying this is SQL code. So I'm saying select. So I want to pull out, what do I actually want to see returned to me from the database? I want to see the name of the hitter. I want to see their ADP from ADP. From the NFBC. I want to see their strikeout rate from Fangraphs, and I want to see their barrel rate. And I want to see that all in one list combined that I can use and then throw out there. So I'm telling SQL what I want to see. I'm then telling SQL where to get it from. And this is where the power of joins comes in. So this is where I'm saying I want to take Trea Turner's strikeout rate from Fangraphs, match that up with Trea Turner's ADP, and then match that up with Trea Turner's barrel rate. Won't get into the kind of details of the syntax here, but this is kind of how you do that in SQL. So you want to join, and for those of you who use SQL, you might be saying, no, you don't want to join on a name. I know that. You want to actually join on the ID numbers of these guys. So like when Nick Castellanos changes his name back to Nicholas next year, it won't break everything. You want to join on the ID number. If you have questions on that, let me know. But basically, I'm joining all this information from these different data sources, putting them all together. And then you can do, this is where I do like the filters. So I want to say, I just want to use last year, this where clause at the bottom. I want to take 2019, use last year. I want to look at everyone with over 300 plate appearances, 30% strikeout rate, and 6% barrel rate. You can save this query, come back to it. And if you want to just tweak, okay, if you just want to say not 6%, I get too many guys back, I'm going to bump that up to 8%, see what gets returned to me. Bump the K rate down to 20%. Like, it's very easy. Once you set this up and get the query running for the first time, you can then play with it, add new information in your select to get more information back to you, and so on and so forth. So again, that's just a very basic SQL query. You can, Ronaldo, you mentioned you can do this kind of thing in Excel. Absolutely. There's even more advanced stuff you can do in SQL, like grouping and all sorts of things that get there. But this is kind of just that basic example. I use what I call MySQL, and I would recommend that to anybody if you're wanting to learn SQL for the first time. There's a lot of different, I guess, forms of SQL out there. There's Microsoft SQL Server, PostgreSQL. MySQL is open source. It's good with Mac and Windows. And there's a lot more information on the web about it if you're Googling things and getting stuck. So some resources, if you want to kind of go down this path, Google MySQL. You might even have it already. I think everyone with a Mac has MySQL. I use what I call MySQL Workbench, and that's the kind of application or program that I use to actually type these queries. Gives it a user interface and makes it a lot easier to use. So if you want to go at it that way, you can do that. If you actually want to learn SQL, there are just so much. There's so much out there to kind of teach you how to do it. The best way that I think for you guys who are just starting out, look up Sabermetrics 101. This is an edX class put on by Andy Andrus, who's a longtime writer for HQ and teaches, I believe, at Boston University, or did teach at Boston University when he put this on. This is an online class. I believe it's free now, that he teaches you how to use SQL specifically for baseball. And that just gives you that motivation to kind of learn it, right? If you're learning something and applying something in a sport that you're interested in, it makes it a lot easier. The other really good thing with Sabermetrics 101, and he's a fantastic teacher. And you also don't need to download any software. It's all web-based. So you can do your exercises in your web browser and learn the basics of SQL that way and use baseball to do so. So that's a subtle plug for Andy's class. It's excellent. I took it. People are leaving in Twitch. A lot of other codeacademy.com is really good. You can use DataCamp as well. I believe that's a fee. And that there's all kinds of information, YouTube, to kind of learn it. But that's kind of the magic behind Bloomboards and combining all this data and making it something that's usable. All right. So again, any questions on that, feel free to reach out to me and I'll hook you up with Andy's class, at least to start out, and that'll get you at least going down the right path. And then finally, you take this SQL query, you get the result to you. So you get a nice kind of clean list of guys with their ADP, strikeout rate, and barrel rate. And then you can go at it that way. I just got a question from Brown. Very nice. Didn't expect to see my SQL queries. I know. I hope I didn't lose some of you too much here, but I did want to show kind of the basics. Am I going to show R and Python also? No, I do use Python a little bit. R I haven't used as much. Just because I'm familiar with SQL and that's kind of my wheelhouse. Nothing wrong. There are a lot of smart people that use R, and that's a perfect segue actually to my next slide, which I'll just touch on real quick. R is another type of programming data analysis language that has a lot more kind of visualization built onto it. So if you want to make fancy graphs and scatter plots and that sort of thing to visualize data and get that out there, R is a fantastic data analysis tool for that. Just real quick, I do use R just very simply to get data. So there's a guy, Bill Petty, who a lot of you might be familiar with, is a genius. He has this package called Baseball R, and I've linked it here on the bottom left. And basically what that allows you to do, without getting into the specifics, is essentially automatically download Fangraphs and StatCast data without having to go to fangraphs.com, Baseball Savant, click, download into Excel, import into your database. This is all, if you can set it up, and Bill has some tutorials on how to do that. You can set it up in R. You just kind of click a button, run a script, and it pulls into your database automatically. It's especially useful for in season, like when games are being played every game or every day, every night, data is constantly getting updated. You don't want to be going in, downloading Excel every day and manually loading that in. For things like off-season analysis and right now, like it's not that much time to be able to do it. But during season, using Bill Petty's Baseball R package just to get data into your system is really, really nice, and it works. And I'm not even scraping the surface with R, but that's what I use it for. So just a quick aside on some next level stuff. And if you want to learn more, I've got the link down there on the left side. And then Who's Yo Poppy posted a link and on Twitch. So thanks for that. All right. So that's my little nerd out geeky side session of how I actually do this. And again, if you have questions, I'm happy to help kind of make you better at it. All right, back to trivia. We got 3 more here. One of the things I look at with StatCast is swinging or pitch mix. All right, I love looking into in pitch mix, and Nick has talked about this in his panels and does a fantastic job. And a lot of the analysis that I see these days is all pitch mix, and it's just fantastic information, the data that we have. So I use this. I've got 3 guesses for you all on who you might think these guys are. I gave you some hints in their division. One of the guys is injured already and probably not going to pitch in 2020 and broke my heart because he's out for, I think, the season, but had 3 pitches over swinging strike rate. All right, so this is a list. This is a board that starts with Max Scherzer and Garrett Cole, right? So that's a pretty good company to keep. These are guys with a 15% swinging strike rate on 3 different pitches. Extremely rare. And again, guesses can do it. So I can run a SQL query, get that information back. I get Scherzer, Cole, Syndergaard. All right. And then I get 3 guys at the bottom here. Yu Darvish was a guess. No, that's not correct. These are guys who are late. One of whom was already brought up in the comments, the helium guy at the bottom. And if we don't get answers here in the next kind of couple minutes, I'll reveal it. But the first guy, NL West, injured. NL Central, I just wrote this guy up. And I'm probably making it too hard. So I'll just go ahead and reveal the first guy. Broke my heart. Tyler Beatty. Griffin Canning's a great guess, Ferna. Tyler Beatty. All right. Change up, curveball, slider. Callan guesses Gallon or Galen, as we might know. That's the correct answer for that bottom guy. So we'll talk about Gallon in just a minute. But Tyler Beatty, man, I was all over him in early drafts just because obviously you look at the pitch mix and anyone who has a changeup, curveball, slider like that, and here's 3 of those pitches in action. Anyone with that kind of base is just fantastic. Here's the curveball. That's Nolan Arenado that you're striking out there. And then your changeup. So Tyler Beatty is a guy who I was all over, and just sucks that he was there because you also had not only the pitch mix, but you had the home park, you had the prospect pedigree. I mean, he wasn't an elite prospect, but was really good. So hope he's better. See him next year. Next guy, everyone's favorite sleeper, who still is kind of cheap in drafts, but Joe Musgrove, changeup, curveball, slider. All right, you look at that pitch mix. Some really good foundational stuff. All right, there's Freddie Freeman striking him out with a changeup. There's that curveball to Bryce Harper, and then Will Myers. Look at that thing, slider, fantastic pitch. Musgrove has these things in place. The thing that Musgrove really got burnt on, his four-seam fastball just got kind of destroyed last year. He caught a lot of the zone with that four-seamer. But when you are looking at somebody like Musgrove, take into, and this is where, again, I go into that start, not the end of player analysis. Yes, Musgrove hasn't had the results. He's never posted a sub-4 ERA in his career. But Pittsburgh has a new regime, an analytically driven pitching coach, Oscar Marin, who has kind of identified things that they want to change with Joe Musgrove. Things like that, where Musgrove's open to a change in approach and actually has the tools, has those 3 secondary pitches to maybe optimize that use of the pitch mix, maybe throw that fastball up, use it a little bit less, that sort of thing. There's adjustments that Musgrove can make to get there. It's just it's the approach that needs to change, but at least he's got the actual skills to be able to do it. And 4-seamer was pretty ugly last year for Musgrove, and that's why he did not post the results that we were looking for. Last one, Zach Gallen, and that was guessed correctly in the presentation as well. Changeup, cutter, and a curve for Gallen. Here's the changeup. God, that's beautiful. This kind of looks more like slider than cutter, but we'll see. I don't know. And then that knuckle curve when he was with Arizona was just beautiful. So Zach Gallen is kind of a helium guy. You do look at the the price with Zach Gallen. Everybody loves Zach Gallen. So that's one drawback, obviously, with him. But obviously has the pieces in place, young, and can definitely get there. That last piece I was talking about, so cutter with Gallen. And Nick, maybe you probably know more on this than I do, but a lot of this, like with pitch classification, cutters and sliders kind of can get grouped together. And then if you also look at like a StatCast versus a Fangraphs, which uses pitch effects, or Brooks Baseball, which uses pitch effects, you might see, or you will see differences, slight differences in some of this data. So swinging strike rates, I got a question from Rob DiPietro a couple of days ago asking, why. And some of it is just pitch classification. They use different algorithms, and like a slider cutter really can be almost the same kind of pitch and get classified differently. So that's just something to kind of keep your eye out for, and don't 100% take these pitch classifications as is. But anyway, all right, another Bloom board, and this is I mentioned we try not to look at 2019 in too much detail, but this is an example of that. So these are guys, the juice ball last year, everyone was hitting homers. Homers were at an all-time high. There were a number of guys who posted like their lowest career homer to fly ball rate compared to their own baseline, and this is a list of those guys. I've got a bullet point here, and we use this at Baseball HQ all the time, saying regression is our game's most powerful force. And I firmly believe that if you have somebody who has their own skill level and deviates every year from that skill level, most of the time they're going to regress back. And regression can be positive or negative. It's essentially, the act of going back to what your general core is. Skill as a hitter. So when I look at this general list, these are guys who in 2019 had that low homer to fly ball rate. And if anyone wants to guess, I've got one guy who I have not identified with a career homer to fly ball rate of almost 24%. So one of the elite power hitters in baseball. That's your subtle hint. But yeah, be careful at looking just at last year only. There are guys on here, like, for example, Miguel Cabrera, Joey Votto, Chris Davis with a C, guys who I think we can all agree are pretty much in decline. And probably, Miguel Cabrera, I put the over on 9.7 again for next year, but I don't think Miggy's getting back to what he was with 20% homer to fly ball rate. So, but again, in general, a lot of these guys, especially you look at like a Rhys Hoskins, someone who is younger, someone who had pretty decent power numbers before we got hit in the hand with a pitch, I believe in August last year, and things tanked. That could have been a reason for that. So again, you want to take and look at these guys kind of case by case, but on average, look at Yolmer Sanchez, 1.5% homer to fly ball last year. That's crazy. You want to regress these guys back to normal. And that's why I have to look for these reasons why. And we do have a right answer from Rinaldi, and that is the other Chris Davis. My final hint was going to be it rhymes with the guy ahead of him on the list, but Chris Davis with a K. And going back to look for reasons why, and I'm going to play this video. This is from May 5th of last year. This is Chris Davis in one of the few games he played in left field. Going for a fly ball, reaching into foul territory, and just nails his side. Obviously, he gets hurt. You can see that. Later on, kind of, admitted that he was playing through that almost all season. Chris Davis is still, I believe, age 31. So still plenty young enough to rebound. And if you believe that the homer to fly ball dip, the power dip for Chris Davis was attributed to that injury, that hip injury that he tried to play through, I would bet on a pretty significant power rebound. So, and just below the kind of the graphic here on the left side, I've got the before and after for Chris Davis. Before this play, he was hitting a homer every 14 at bats, xwOBA 345, and numbers tanked after May 5th. So those are the kinds of things. Again, when I say this is the start and not the end of an analysis, when I bring up this list of guys, this is a perfect example of that. Why did Chris Davis with a K? Why did that power tank? All right. Last but not least, we've got 8 minutes left, so we're good on time. Cool. Last but not least, one of the other things I love to look at with these boards is pitch mix changes. That can really tell. And I talked about this earlier, like I'm with Frankie Montas, like I'm much more willing to buy in on somebody, on a pitcher that, maybe just has 1 year or half year of being really good, but it was supported by a change in approach or change in pitch mix. So this is just one example. Guys who threw the most sliders in 2019 compared to 2018. Hesitated a little bit to throw a board on here with Adrian Sampson leading the top. But these are guys who had the biggest uptick in slider usage from 2018 to 2019. And you look at the bullet point on the left here, you can do this, and especially hopefully when the season starts, you can do this month to month, half to half, start to start. If you really want to get ahead and not wait for a breakout to happen, you can look at pitch mix changes pretty much from start to start and velocity and effectiveness of those pitches, and really use the smallest of samples to jump in and fab some of these guys. If you did that with Lucas Giolito last year, for example, that was quite profitable for you. It was pretty obvious that he had an uptick in velocity and was throwing a different pitch mix. So these are the kinds of things that we can look it up. All right, give us some hints on this one. The guy who had the second highest uptick in baseball last year, used to be really good with Oakland, was really bad in 2018, went to a new team in 2019, new pitching coach. Again, these context factors that would lead to a pitch mix change, and we've got it. Sonny Gray. So I'll talk that up another $5 to PitchCon. Sonny Gray really drove up his slider usage last year, and you can see on the bottom here, this is just kind of a snapshot of what I use for some of these guys. A very even pitch mix for Sonny Gray. Look at that usage between his 4-seam curve slider and 2-seam. Like that's pretty beautiful. That's pretty flat. Look at the ground ball rates for a lot of those pitches. Obviously, your 4-seamers going to have a more fly ball tendency, but your ground balls on the curve, on the slider, on the 2-seam, that's fantastic. And then swing strike rate on the slider, 18%, pretty good. Sliders are usually miss the most bats of any pitch. But again, change in pitch mix, new team, new pitching coach, new philosophy. That gives me more kind of reason to buy in on what Sonny Gray did last year compared to in New York when he was throwing way too many fastballs. All right. So that is what I have for you today. If you want to go through and kind of look at all of the boards that I've done this draft season, just go to Twitter and search the hashtag Bloomboards. It'll show up, click latest, and you'll see kind of everything that I've thrown out there from January to pretty much early March. And things have dried up lately, of course, but once we get things running back here again, you'll see them back on your timeline. So thank you so much for the interaction, for the guesses. This was awesome. And thank you, Nick, for giving me an opportunity to do this, man.
Oh, that was fantastic, man. That was so great. Really, thanks so much for showcasing those. I think it's been great having this balance during this conference of teaching and also going over actually like, hey, we like these guys for the 2020 season. I think a lot of people would expect this entire conference to be just, okay, we're going to do analysis right now. It hasn't been a lot of that.
Yeah.
And this Bloom boards was a fantastic addition here to get more of that analysis. I'd say my biggest question that I have for you, Ryan, is with all these Bloom boards, what has been the one that's really made you think the most and gotten you more in on a player?
The pitch mix stuff, like just being able to look at change. And with pitchers, just for me at least, like it's so much easier, I think, to analyze pitchers, just because we have the data to kind of go behind the pitch mix stuff. Like I look at a hitter, and yes, they make swing changes, stance changes, and get their hips through. Like I'll fully admit, that is not my forte. That is not my expertise. So like, no doubt hitters are changing as constantly as pitchers are. It's just so hard for me to kind of analyze and quantify that as a way to do it. So
one of us. You're one of us, man. I mean, I see all the time I cheat in this industry because all I do is I just focus on one thing. That's all I do. I think that's the easiest thing to do. Mm-hmm. I don't take any time with hitters or even relievers. I'm like, no. Pitchers, we have pitch mix. We have that data. We have that information. Let's do it. So,
yep.
Before he was injured, then where were you taking Tyler Beatty?
Pretty much, everywhere, but like probably, I don't know. I had him in like every champions draft I did, probably like 23rd, 25th round. I think he was going in like the 30th, maybe high 20s.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. He was,
yeah.
We're doing a lot of like a 12-teamer mocks and stuff. And Beatty was always finding his way into, I think, the last 3 rounds. I mean, like he's exactly the kind of 12-teamer guy that you would normally target, where you have a pitch mix change, you have something that is indicating something more, but it could very well blow up. And if it does, all right, fine, you just shove him back.
You move on.
Week.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff. And also, I mean, the other two there, Gallon and Musgrove. So you're saying there's a lot of helium in Gallon. Also, King Hippo. I don't know how we didn't say this before. A Gallon gal. Duh. Oh, my God. Now we have Boyd boys and Gallon gals. Like, it's amazing. I'm never going to let that go now. But are you a Gallon gal then too?
I am not as much of a Gallon gal as other people, but yeah, I mean, there's reason to buy in. It's just so many people are taking him at, you think you like Gallon. Jeff Erickson talks about this all the time. He thinks he's the Gallon gal, but someone else is. So yeah, I haven't gotten a much of Gallon yet. The price is high, but he could easily blow that out of the water.
And the last one there was Joe Musgrove, who I think I have him around 45 as far as my starting pitcher ranks go. Would you put him around there, or are you even higher than that or lower?
I'd put him even higher. And I when I wrote him up last week for HQ, like the price is really good with Musgrove. Like you look at his ADP, he's roughly like a $5 pick when you convert ADP to dollar values. And he put up a $5 season last year. So even if he just repeats what he did last year, like he's not going to kill you. I just think there's so many more avenues for Musgrove because he has that trio of secondaries, has a new pitching coach to kind of, try new things, and he's open to it. He's been interviewed as saying that. I just think there's more avenues that he gets better than what he did last year.
Definitely. There is one question I see a lot of people asking. Where do you host your database?
Just on my own computer. So it's somewhat of a misnomer. With SQL, it says you need a server, but your computer can be your own server. Not the most secure thing in the world, but that's what I use. I just use my own computer for it.
Well, Ryan, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, and even for donating to the cause here.
Yes, I will do that when I hang up here. But
you're incredible. Like, thank you so much for being here at PitchCon, supporting what we're doing, raising money for Feeding America, and yeah, just great to see you, man.
Yeah, likewise, man. Last time it was first pitch and Tout Wars, so hopefully again soon.
Yeah, please. All right, we'll see you soon. Take care.
See ya.
All right, that was Ryan Bloomfield. Fantastic presentation. I really, really enjoyed it.